And the most important thing right now is to guarantee peace and security for the entire population of all of Mexico. And that is what is being done.
It really did look and feel like a war zone.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Monday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From cartel violence in Mexico to a look back at 4 years of war in Ukraine. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. A massive winter storm is barreling across the East Coast, dropping up to 3 inches of snow per hour.
New York City has not faced a storm of this scale in the last decade.
This is a very serious storm that has the potential to be a historic nor'easter.
More than 40 million people across the Northeast are under blizzard warnings, and the combination of intense snowfall and damaging winds are making the weather especially dangerous. Whiteout conditions prompted school districts to cancel in-person classes, and air travel is being brought to a halt. Despite the conditions, some people in New York are taking advantage of the rare snow day.
We have snowshoes in New York City, and there's a bunch of snow in Central Park, so we're like, got to seize the day, get out there, do a little snowshoeing this morning, and it should be a lot of fun. We're a couple mountain men living in New York City. Finally, we got the opportunity to showcase our skills. Mother Nature gave us a run for our money, and let's see what she's got.
A citywide travel ban is in effect in New York until noon, and today's snow day is the first proper one since 2019. Happening right now, a number of U.S. tourists are stranded in Mexico. Now, this is coming amid a wave of violence that was sparked after the Mexican military killed a notorious cartel leader. And now, suspected cartel members are taking to the streets to retaliate. It's creating a nerve-wracking situation not only for Mexicans, but for the countless numbers of people from all over the world who are vacationing there. Scripps News senior national correspondent Alex Miller live in New York for us with the latest on this. And Alex, what do we know what's happening there right now?
Well, there is a lot of anxiety among people who do not live there and among the Mexicans who are just trying to stay safe. The president urging calm right now. Look, this is Mexico's most wanted cartel boss, the head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as El Mencho. He is described by the DEA as one of the most powerful and influential and ruthless leaders of any cartel. They supply a lot of the fentanyl that has caused hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United States and around the world. They are known, again, to be ruthless. They behead people. In 2015, they killed 24 police officers in just a 6-week time frame. And so he was killed after Mexican military personnel encountered him, tried to make an arrest, tried to capture him. The U.S. saying that they provided support, Holly, to that as well, but saying that this really was something that the Mexican military handled, and they killed 8 other members of the cartel while they were doing this. The State Department had offered $15 million for information leading to his arrest. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
And Alex, the situation we understand is escalating, not only where it happened, but nationwide in Mexico. What does that look like?
Yeah, we are seeing some 250 blockades nationwide. As you mentioned, the violence is escalating, setting fires to cars all across the country. There are 25 Mexican National Guard troops are dead from 6 separate attacks there, and the Associated Press reporting that more than 1,000 people were trapped at Guadalajara Zoo. People had to sleep on buses there because they were scared to go home because they felt it was safer to be in the zoo than to go make that trip back to their homes. So the U.S. has told tourists to shelter in place. We've seen some schools in Mexico canceled. One of our own news director at the Scripps station in Buffalo happened to be there. Listen to what he said about what he's experienced so far.
Yesterday, a completely different story than today. Yesterday was when you really saw the worst of this. I was walking into the downtown area yesterday morning, and you could see smoke pouring from different points of the city. And then I turned one corner to go to the gym, actually, and that's when I saw flames from a car that was just in the middle of the intersection on fire. You saw the smoke. At one point, it was so heavy that it was just pouring over the downtown area in Zona Romantica and right onto the beach. I mean, it was just such a surreal sight to see, because this is such a beautiful, peaceful place.
And Holly, no airports have been closed, but we have seen cancellations both domestic and internationally. I want to put a number on our screen for our viewers. This is the numbers that the State Department has provided for U.S. citizens for them to be able to call if they are having problems. They can call one number from the United States and Canada, and one if you are in Mexico, to make sure that citizens are that they are able to get in touch with the State Department if they need.
All right, Scripps News senior national correspondent Alex Miller live in New York for us. Thank you for your reporting on this. Another tense situation at Mar-a-Lago. A 21-year-old man from Cameron, North Carolina was shot and killed after police say he attempted to breach the perimeter. Officers say he was armed with a gas can and a shotgun, which you see right there. Scripps News Group's Lali Salas joins us now from Mar-a-Lago with the latest on the investigation.
I'm yards away from Mar-a-Lago, where investigators say an armed man was shot and killed after breaching the inner perimeter overnight. Here's what we know. The man has been identified to the Associated Press as 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin from North Carolina. Investigators believe he recently went missing and traveled south, picking up the shotgun along the way. Officials say it was around 1:30 a.m. when security detected Martin inside the inner perimeter. Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw says a deputy and 2 Secret Service agents confronted the man near the north gate. He was carrying a gas can and a shotgun and was ordered to drop the items.
He put down the gas can, raised the shotgun to a shooting position. At that point in time, the deputy and the 2 Secret Service agents fired their weapons and neutralized the threat. He is deceased at the scene.
The FBI is now handling the investigation as agents process evidence. They are urging neighbors who live nearby to check their security cameras for anything suspicious. Officials don't yet know how many shots were fired or if Martin's shotgun was loaded. The sheriff also confirmed deputies were wearing body cams during the incident. We're told the president was not in the state of Florida at the time, and Sheriff Bradshaw says no one in the property was ever in danger thanks to the quick action. In Mar-a-Lago, Zitlani Solache, Scripps News Group.
We'll be back in just a moment as we continue tracking today's top news just for you. You're watching Today As It Happens, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's dive right back in. A man in the audience of the BAFTA Awards in London shouted the N-word Sunday night. The man, John Davidson, shouted that slur at black actors Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, who were presenting an award. But Davidson suffers from Tourette's syndrome. The audience had been warned that involuntary swearing might occur during the ceremony. The BBC is apologizing for airing the incident without censoring it, despite editing out other parts of the show. In Georgia, a blown engine on a Delta flight started a large grass fire at the Savannah airport. According to air traffic control audio, Delta Airlines Flight 1067 lost an engine on takeoff Sunday night, and the flight to Atlanta returned to the airport, but that blowout started a grass fire near the taxiway. Smoke started to impact visibility in the area. Crews were able to get control of the fire a short time later. Thankfully, no one was hurt. FBI Director Kash Patel is under fire for reportedly using an FBI jet to fly to the Winter Olympics and party with Team USA. A video obtained by CNN shows him in the men's hockey team locker room, drinking beer, wearing a gold medal, and dancing and singing with the team. In a follow-up social media post, Patel addressed the moment, saying in part, quote, "For the very concerned media, yes, I love America." Patel has faced congressional investigations into his use of government resources for personal reasons. But according to the FBI, Patel was in Italy for multiple official engagements, traveling to Milan on a Justice Department jet. The fallout continues after the Supreme Court struck down most of former President Trump's emergency tariff authority last week. But now the big question is what happens to the billions of dollars that they have already collected. So let's bring in Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett, who's live for us in Denver, to help us sort this out. Maura, if the court struck down the tariffs, why isn't the administration just automatically issuing refunds? And what would it actually take for businesses or consumers to get that money back?
I mean, Holly, that is the big question that we're seeing businesses, consumers ask about all throughout the weekend, because logically, if they're seeing it as the Supreme Court struck down the fact that you've been collected these tariffs as illegal, then why aren't we getting that money back? Now, the administration has said that they don't have guidance yet on whether or not they can issue these refunds or how they would even do that. They said that issuing billions of dollars in refunds like this would be absolutely unprecedented. I think it's important to note, too, in that Supreme Court ruling that we got on Friday, there was no acknowledgement outside of Justice Kavanaugh's opinion about the refunds, which was pretty interesting to see in terms of them deciding to not take a stance on that. It wasn't directly involved in the suit that they were reviewing, but because this is the ripple effect, it is interesting that they did not weigh in. Instead, what the administration is forecasting is that they're going to have to look and see what the International Court of Trade does, what the district courts do, as other cases make their way through the courts using that Supreme Court precedent as guidance. Now, it's important to note the Penn Wharton budget model, which is a nonpartisan research initiative, estimated on Friday that businesses could be owed up to $165 billion in tariff refunds. Think about the small businesses across the country as well as these larger corporations that rely on trade with other countries in order to get American consumers what they're looking for. And so that's something that was raised immediately upon this ruling coming down. I want you to hear directly from the U.S. Trade Representative Administrator Jamieson Greer about how they're kind of flying blind until the courts weigh in when it comes to refunds.
Well, we need the court to tell us what to do. They've created a situation where they struck down the tariffs and gave zero guidance on this. My expectation is that they'll have to step in and give some direction on how they want that to be done, if at all, whether plaintiffs had to have made a claim or not.
Now, it's estimated that leading up to the Supreme Court decision, there had been about 1,000 claims already filed in courts across the country asking for tariff refunds, calling that directive the president issuing these tariffs illegal, and those cases had been stayed while the Supreme Court went through its hearings, went through and figured out its decision, and now those claims can start to process through the courts. The Liberty Justice Center is one of those nonprofits that's representing several small businesses, and they point out that for individual businesses, potential refunds could reach tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on how much they paid in tariffs, and those dollars can ultimately mean reopening product lines, rehiring staff, lowering prices, or simply catching up on those missed margins that they've been operating on very thin margins for the last year or so, and so that's something that we'll just have to watch and wait and see how it works through the courts. But unfortunately, we know that those timelines can be pretty lengthy, months or even years estimated for these refunds to potentially come through, Holly.
And Maura, I would imagine it's going to be a little difficult to sort of separate what the consumer gets and what a business owner may get, especially if you're a small business owner, because many business owners had to pass those costs onto consumers. Do they even know how they would figure all of that out? Because they may have increased prices, although they did maybe perhaps take a little more, or I should say a little more in, because they had to pay it out for the tariff. So how do you separate that?
Right. And I think the important note is, at least in the near future, in the immediate interim, we know that a lot of these businesses placed orders, including the cost of tariffs over the past several weeks. Those are sitting in warehouses right now, getting distributed out to different stores and businesses. Consumers right now are still going to have to be paying that passed on cost of the tariff that the companies were making. Now, it definitely is going to be a tricky way to navigate. I think a big question that we've seen over the weekend is, do businesses get the refunds? Can consumers get the refunds? refunds. We saw Illinois Governor Pritzker and California Governor Newsom say that they want direct refunds to consumers, because it's been estimated that the average consumer has spent $1,700 additional dollars than they would have if not for the tariffs. Governor Pritzker in Illinois asking for a refund check directly to his residents there. And so it's definitely going to have to be detailed out in those lawsuits that we're seeing that different businesses and companies are getting involved with to push using the precedent from the Supreme Court to get those refunds. One would hope that in accounting and tracking, profit margins, costs, and losses, businesses have been tracking how much they're spending in tariffs. We know from various reviews that about 90% of those costs have been passed on to consumers. So it's safe to say, as they detailed those or as they tracked those, that these will then be detailed in those lawsuits, and hopefully that's what they'll be able to push on in terms of getting those exact numbers in terms of refunds, Holly.
This is Today as It Happened. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. All right, let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. We have breaking news just in at this hour. British police have arrested the former UK ambassador to the U.S., Peter Mandelson. He's accused of misconduct related to his ties with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm Scripps News' Holly Furfer. You're watching On the Scene here. Scripps News international correspondent Stuart Smith is live in London for us on this breaking news. And Stuart, this is another stunning development out of the UK. What do we know at this hour?
It's deja vu in a sense. Just last week we were talking about the former Prince Andrew being accused of exactly the same crime, and also to the exact same man, Jeffrey Epstein. This time though, it's a politician, the former trade secretary for the UK. He's been involved in the European Union, and most recently, as you said, just 6 months ago, was Britain's ambassador to the United States. Now he's been arrested. He's not been charged, but again, it relates to passing on sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein while in official government position. Peter Mandelson, we don't know what he's saying at the moment to police as we speak. He is in a police cell giving an interview to authorities. He has not yet been charged, though he has previously denied any criminal wrongdoing, though has said that his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein went on far longer than it should have. This seems to have come to a head after the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who was working with Peter Mandelson at the time, gave some documents to police which could be important in this investigation. But the majority of what we believe these allegations relate to appear once again to have come from that trove of documents, the Epstein files, and specifically it is likely that police are looking into the fact that he allegedly passed on information to Jeffrey Epstein about the inner workings of what was going on at the time of the 2008 financial crash, passing on sensitive information about what the government planned to do in order to try and rectify that issue. Like I say, he's not pleaded to any charges. He has not yet been charged, and previously he's denied any wrongdoing. But a major problem for Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, who just 6 months ago he had the full trust of, now at the centre of this government, this big bombshell.
We know what happens next as far as the judicial system there. Does he have to be indicted first before he actually faces the charges? And if so, if he is indicted and does go to trial with this, what could be the potential penalties if found guilty?
Yeah, so the way it works here is he's arrested first. Once the police believe they have enough evidence to charge him, which is to formally put to him that he has committed a crime, there will then be a long investigation. But that process may not start yet. The police at this point may have only arrested him in order to search his two properties, one here in North London, very close to where I am now, the other elsewhere in England. By arresting him, they searched those properties, and it's likely if, for example, what happened with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, they find the documents they need, he would then be released. But he could be charged, and if he's charged, he may then end up staying in police custody, and then there could be a court case which would involve the jury to also pass judgment on him, which is why we have to be careful about what we say here in the UK. But the maximum sentence for this crime, this misconduct in public office, the same offence that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was accused of, is life imprisonment. So it's a really serious thing. The difficulty, though, is it's a pretty ancient law, and the wording of this is quite difficult for the police to prove, which means it could take months of investigatory work looking at documents that have come from your side, as well as documents and digital searches that are done here by police, before a full package of evidence could be presented in order to bring this process any further.
Thank you for that clarification. And before I let you go, first it was former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor now, and now Mandelson. So is there any indication that there might be more arrests coming down the line?
No, these two really do seem to be the ones that have certainly publicly been the most involved. Remember, this allegation doesn't relate to any of the sexual misconduct or anything like that. It's purely about misconduct in public office, and there are very few people who have been at that level of government who are known to have been in contact with Jeffrey Epstein for so long, whose names have also been mentioned in those files at such a senior position. So misconduct in public office does mean this rather limits who might be investigated, but for sure more names could come out, and then if they do, I suspect we'll see a similar reaction from the British police.
Stuart Smith, live for us in London on this breaking news. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more of today's top stories on Today As It Happened. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. This is Scripps News' end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories of the day. So why don't we pick up right where we left off?
President Trump is preparing to address the nation after completing his first year in office. His address on Tuesday could be a launching pad for the message Republicans will deliver to voters in this year's midterm elections, which of course will determine control of the House and the Senate. And when speaking earlier today, the president says, quote, "Get your popcorn, it might go long."
So we have a country that's now doing well. We have the greatest economy we've ever had. We have the most activity we've ever had. I'm making a speech tomorrow night, and you'll be hearing me say that. And it's going to be a long speech because we have so much to talk about.
And Americans say they will be paying attention Tuesday night when the president delivers that State of the Union address. A new Scripps News Talker research poll finds more than 3/4 of the country is very or somewhat interested in the annual address, with 66% saying it's more important this year than in years past. That primetime speech to a joint session of Congress comes as many Americans feel the president has yet to deliver on so many of the economic promises made in his 2024 campaign. In fact, nearly half of those surveyed said they are most interested in hearing Trump talk about the economy, followed closely by inflation and the cost of goods. And Olympic skier Lindsey Vonn is finally out of the hospital. In an Instagram video, she credits her doctor with saving her leg after her massive crash at the Olympic Games. Vonn says the fractures in her left leg are dealing with compartment syndrome. She says had it not been identified and corrected with surgery, doctors may have had to amputate her leg. Dr. Tom Hackett traveled to Italy with Vonn because she was skiing with a torn ACL in her knee. Vonn is still immobile, and her bone fractures will likely take a year to heal. Well, 4 years into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Europe's biggest conflict since World War II, the toll is staggering. A U.S. think tank estimates up to 1.8 million soldiers killed, wounded, or missing on both sides. The UN puts civilian deaths in Ukraine at nearly 15,000, with, of course, no end in sight. Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini joins us now live from Kyiv. Jason, this is, I believe, your 14th trip to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion. Talk about the technological evolution on the battlefield that you've seen firsthand.
Hi, Andrew. It's all about drones. And one thing I should tell you is that just a few minutes ago, we heard the air raid alert. And what
that may mean, what that often means, is that there are Russian drones, Shahed drones. These are long-range drones that may be headed towards this city. That certainly happened many, many times this winter, and most of them are shot down by the Ukrainians, and it's even possible that timing-wise, you might even hear in the background large caliber machine guns trying to shoot them out of the sky, and if they miss them, well, many of them are hitting Ukraine's electrical infrastructure. I mean, people in this city right now only have electricity still just for a few hours a day because this city's not been able, this country's not been able to repair the infrastructure fast enough, and once they do, it gets destroyed again. But this really is a drone war. When we talk about that, the revolution is happening on the battlefield itself. That's something we've been following so closely from early on, but things took a major leap a couple of years ago, and that's when we met a pilot named Darwin, very memorable individual who we visited in his bunker as he was attacking Russians using what are called FPV drones. Take a look.
Ну, ти дійсно почуваєш себе птахом. В кінці взривається. Ну, це ж просто неймовірно.
The drones, called FPVs, first-person view, are deployed on suicide runs to devastating effect. It's a high-risk mission. The pilots are the hunters and the hunted.
Так, тут бажано довго не затримуватись, щоб не світитись на засоби розвідки.
Being close enough to kill means you're close enough to get killed by drone pilots on the other side.
They found the base of a Russian FPV team. Right now they're trying to target them.
This is a journey into the future of war. A world of young men with nerves of steel, hopped up on nicotine, caffeine, and adrenaline. They may look like gamers, but this is no game.
So Darwin and his team, they were really at the cutting edge at the time we filmed that. That was 2 years ago. Now there are thousands upon thousands of teams just like Darwin's. The Russians have them as well. They have their elite drone units that are attacking the Ukrainians out there on the battlefield. One thing that's really interesting is we checked in with Darwin recently, and he said, hey, you can come visit us again, but this time you would have to hike in 15 kilometers, was about 8-9 miles by foot. There's no longer going to their location where they're doing their drone launches. They're not doing that by vehicle anymore because vehicles, those are prime targets for Russian drones. So they have to carry all their explosives, all their drones with them, all that distance, and they don't just stay there for the day. They stay there for days at a time once they get to their secret location. Andrew?
Yeah, and Jason, giving us real-time insights into how the drones are impacting this war as you deliver this report from Kyiv. Of course, please stay safe. But I am interested to know how drones have impacted maybe your own coverage of this now 4-year conflict. How have drones sort of evolved in how the media is covering this war?
Frankly speaking, Andrew, it is a much more difficult and dangerous war to cover than it was even 6 months ago. Last summer, I was in the city of Kramatorsk, right? Now that city has become very dangerous. Not too many journalists go there anymore. That's in the east. It's about, I would say, 8 miles, 10 miles from the front line itself. Well, now it's within range of Russian FPV drones. I'll tell you a story. There's a producer, fixer, as we call it in the industry, named Dimitri, who I've been working with these last 4 years, and he just told me a story. He was there with another outlet and was driving through Kramatorsk, and where we were last summer. He has this device that allows him to see if there's a drone in the area around him. He's able to see what the drone sees. It intercepts the video signal. So it's sort of like in a horror film where the call is coming from within the house. Well, he saw the building right in front of him on a drone, a Russian drone. It was a trap. He managed to turn his vehicle the other direction and outrace it. But it just goes to show that it is wildly dangerous now to go to the places that we were going 6 months, 9 months, a year ago, places that have been dozens of times because the range of the drones keeps getting longer and the number of them keeps growing by orders of magnitude. It's wildly dangerous, and as a result, it's harder and harder to get real human stories like the story that we told of Darwin, where you really get to know the people who are fighting this war. Andrew?
Fascinating reporting, and of course the amount of time you spent on the ground really coming into focus now as this conflict reaches the 4-year mark. Our senior international correspondent Jason Bellini for us. Jason, thank you. Tensions tightening even more between the U.S. and Iran. President Trump wants Tehran to give up its nuclear program. Iran, of course, refuses. And today, the State Department ordering non-essential diplomats out of Lebanon. That move reminiscent of last summer, right before the president ordered strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Scripps News senior White House correspondent Haley Bull is live with us now. So, Haley, what is the White House saying at this hour?
Yeah, Andrew, a significant next set of talks are scheduled for Thursday in Geneva. U.S. official confirming Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner once again set to take part in those that conversation hosted by Oman between the Americans and Iranians. We understand Iran has been expected to return a written proposal, according to a U.S. official, after the last round of talks. But as of Sunday, Iran's foreign minister told CBS News in an interview they were still working on it. Now, as President Trump is weighing his options when it comes to Iran, the Iranians have made multiple public appearances, including on some U.S. networks, underscoring both diplomacy and warnings as we continue to see U.S. military buildup in the region. A spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry today warned Iran would act ferociously, he said, to any act of aggression, stating, quote, "There is no limited strike." Now, a White House official previously told us when it comes down to it, the president believes, quote, has been clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons or the capacity to build them, and that they cannot enrich uranium. That comes down to the crux of the back and forth we have seen in public statements with the Iranians is their nuclear program. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also expected to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later in the week, as we have seen Netanyahu again warn Iran today that they would respond, quote, with a force they cannot even imagine. So a lot of things happening here as we are watching these developments, as we see that tension continue to build.
All right, Scripps News senior White House correspondent Haley Bull for us. Haley, thank you.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
We've got to be able to get snow cleared as quickly as possible so that we can get power restored as quickly as possible. And that's why we don't need people on the road who shouldn't be on the road.
Thanks for staying with us here on Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We have your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey announcing moments ago she's deploying the National Guard to help people get to one of 17 warming centers that the state has opened up. Nearly 300,000 people have lost power in the Commonwealth, and it's the wind reaching Category 1 hurricane strength, making it difficult for crews to get out and restore power. Scripps News Group's Chris Conti reports from Boston.
For the first time since 2022, nearly 4 years, we are seeing blizzard conditions here in the greater Boston area. And yes, the snow has been coming down incredibly heavy for the past 12 hours, but the snow is only part of the story here. It is really the wind that tells the entire picture of just how impactful this blizzard has been up and down the East Coast. The wind has just been biting and running against the coast since the storm came crashing in on Sunday night. Hundreds of thousands of people across New England and New York are without power because of this storm. A lot of coastal flooding concerns given the intensity of how much it has rapidly intensified over the course of the last few hours. Crews are doing their best to stay ahead of trying to keep roads and sidewalks and critical infrastructure clear. But when the snow has just been coming down so heavily, so intensely for the better part of a day now, only adding insult to injury here is that there is more snow possibly on the way for later in the week. Chris Conti, Scripps News Group in Boston.
And the partial government shutdown, specifically Department of Homeland Security, front and center. There are questions on how FEMA responds to this blizzard that we've been covering throughout the afternoon. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nate Reed, he joins me now live from Capitol Hill. And Nate, what did you learn?
Well, at this point, Andrew, the Department of Homeland Security is saying that a lot of FEMA's functions are continuing to be underway, even though those employees are deemed essential, not getting paid. But a lot of the things they typically do during big storms, we are told, are still happening, according to a Department of Homeland Security official. The last update on this was yesterday, but Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem saying in a statement, quote, despite the Democrat shutdown, DHS is working with state and local authorities and FEMA to coordinate closely with state and local authorities, and prepare for this storm. I just want to note as well, they have a note up on their website saying that FEMA's travel related to active disasters is not canceled, and FEMA will continue to coordinate closely with the Department of Homeland Security and continue their mission critical operations for active disasters, including immediate response and critical survivor assistance, even though we are in a partial government shutdown, which, as I will remind you, Andrew, is impacting the TSA, the Coast Guard, and of course FEMA, among other agencies like the U.S. Secret Service, which all fall under that larger umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. Also under that umbrella, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, something that Democrats have been holding out support for in exchange for what they want as policy changes, massive policy changes for the way that DHS operates.
And Nate, you mentioned TSA. There were some back and forth over the idea of whether pre-check would be available for travelers. What's the latest there?
It was not available, then it was all of a sudden available. And this was something that, Democratic members of Congress, have hit the Trump administration over, saying that even in the last shutdown, TSA PreCheck and Global Entry, both two popular traveler programs that are run by the agency, were both available for the entirety of the 43-day government shutdown. Now, ultimately, the Department of Homeland Security kind of backtracking on half of those, saying that TSA PreCheck, the expedited traveler assistance program at airports, will remain operational, but they will not be providing courtesy escorts to members of Congress, something that they typically will do. Certainly will be noticeable as members make their way back to Washington, D.C. ahead of the State of the Union address tomorrow night here on Capitol Hill. But worth noting that Global Entry, that popular program for people who are arriving back from out of the country, provides expedited screening if you have an interview and register your biometrics with the Department of Homeland Security beforehand. That is not currently operational. If you have the Global Entry app for pre-submitting your arrival, you will receive an error note if you try and open it. We are told that will remain shut down through the shutdown. There's also the question of how long TSA PreCheck will continue to operate. At this point, the Department of Homeland Security is saying they're taking it on a case-by-case basis in terms of staffing at individual airports. And just a reminder, Andrew, while TSA agents are not being paid, there's the question of whether they start to call out sick as they either look to replace childcare or other services that they might not be able to afford without a paycheck. It'll be a couple more weeks before they actually see their first missed paycheck, but certainly a lot of concerns about just what that impact will be on the workforce, and furthermore, how long this shutdown could last. Democrats are fairly dug in. They want to see major policy changes at ICE in order to unlock their support for a funding package to reopen the shuttered government.
All right, Scripps News senior congressional correspondent Nate Reed for us. Nate, thank you.
Up next on Today's It Happened.
My entire family have served the United States mission, some directly in official roles and others indirectly supporting through other roles. I wore the uniform. I held a top secret clearance. I served honorably for a decade. If my family, who stood with Americans, isn't good enough, who is?
Welcome back to Today's It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into the rundown of the day's top stories.
Nick Reiner pleading not guilty to the killings of his parents, Hollywood director Rob Reiner and producer Michelle Singer Reiner. The 32-year-old facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. The charges carry a maximum sentence of life without possibility of parole or the death penalty. Well, Afghan allies who stood with U.S. troops are now facing a tough road stuck in limbo, waiting for answers that may not come anytime soon. Advocates are sounding the alarm, but new crackdowns have only added to the confusion and fear for these families. Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman has been following this story. So, Katia, what's the future look like for those allies?
Well, Andrew, good afternoon. Right now, the future looks grim, and that's for Afghan allies and their families who remain in limbo. These people, as you'll recall, are people who helped the U.S. military on the ground, risking their lives providing intel and support during wartime. And now many are stuck in Afghanistan, or if they were lucky to leave, they're in what's called third countries, waiting in a refugee pipeline that has effectively been closed by the Trump administration. And on a global call earlier today, we heard from advocates who spoke out saying that there's tough news coming forward, and it's unlikely right now that we'll see any movement in that pipeline for the next few years. And we heard from an Afghan American Marine who had come to the U.S. as a refugee child from Afghanistan and has family still in Afghanistan. Here's what he had to say about the situation.
My entire family have served the United States mission, some directly in official roles and others indirectly supporting through other roles. I wore the uniform. I held a top secret clearance. I served honorably for a decade. If my family, who stood with Americans, isn't good enough, who is?
Now, you'll see there were reactions as we heard him speaking on this Zoom call. There were hundreds of Afghan allies and refugees who joined the call to hear more information as fear and confusion, Andrew, have worsened. And that's as the government continues to unlevel the playing field when it comes to legal immigration, not just immigration for people who are in the country unlawfully. And a few days ago, a leaked DHS MO even furthered that fear and confusion as they directed ICE agents to detain refugees who entered the U.S. lawfully but who have not obtained a green card or permanent residency. And a year after entering the country, they could be deported as according to this new policy from the DHS, which is saying that they're looking to re-vet these people, these refugees, and many of them who've been waiting to even access a green card could be detained or deported if they do not show up for these interviews. Meanwhile, advocates are saying it's a trap, that if they show up at DHS, at ICE offices across the country, they could very well be detained on any basis that the government comes up with. And so we're hearing that any red flags, according to this DHS memo, could leave them vulnerable to being sent back to Afghanistan or just deported to another country altogether. Andrew?
Yeah, and Katie, of course, we've seen so much anxiety in these communities about policy changes that we've seen from Biden to President Trump. What has the government said in response or sort of defense of some of the issues that you're talking about?
Well, right now, the government said the justification for this move, which is pretty unprecedented and it's going against a long-standing policy, they've said it's because of national security and fraud-related issues. But refugee advocate groups say that the new rules, which are part of the administration's crackdown on immigration, are really targeting people who are just trying to follow the rules and get into the country legally.
Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman for us in New York. Katia, thank you.
We're so appreciative that you spent some of your evening with us here on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a brilliant Monday night.